My mic was muted, sorry. It is time for Dry Bones. And so before we get started, we have a very special show this evening. It's going to be a 2-hour special edition of Dry Bones because we're going to talk about some stuff. All right, that's the best way I can put it. We're going to talk about some stuff. We're going to talk about DID. We're going to talk about SRA. And I know somebody out there is like, well, usually you're talking about the LGBT. So what are all these new initials and what do they mean? Oh, and wait a minute. We have a brother right here named John.
Who dat? Who dat?
So say hi to John, everybody. I met John at Take on the World 2019. That was last year, 2019. Oh, yeah, help me.
Oh man, you've been quarantined way too long.
Wow. So last year in 2019, I met John and his beautiful wife at Take on the World, and they live in Maine. And I'm like, nobody ever lives in Maine that I get to meet at conferences. And so we've really connected. And so I was blessed beyond measure to actually come and partake and observe my very first Passover.
Praise God.
Yes, with John and Judy. And it was amazing. And so we had our Passover meal and we struck the doorway and we prayed and we are just enjoying fellowship. And so I'm not going to ramble on because believe it or not, I could get a bit long-winded sometimes. So we do have an amazing show planned for you this evening. So last week, we had Christopher Kane and his beautiful wife, Lisa. Well, you know, there really just wasn't enough time in 1 hour to really cover all the basics of DID. And I'm going to allow Vicki to come in here and to kind of explain to you DID, SRA, the difference, and yeah.
Well, I can give you a layman's explanation, and Lisa and Sarah can correct me as soon as they get on. But my understanding is that DID, dissociative identity disorder, is something that can occur when a child is severely traumatized, and there's many different terms. I'm not sure if some of them are not PC or if some of them have outmoded, others are not, but you hear some people say alters. That's kind of, I think, the one that I use a lot. Back in the day, people used to say split personalities. That's pretty outdated, but that comes through trauma, and it does not necessarily have anything to do with, well, it doesn't have to have anything to do with Satanism or the occult or anything ritual. It can happen just through childhood sexual abuse. And whereas SRA, satanic ritual abuse, is a child who undergoes severe trauma of all levels because of occult rituals that they're utilized for. Elisa and Gabriel, the Hampstead case. And as a result of SRA, it's not a guarantee that everyone who has gone through SRA has DID, but as we learn from Tom Dunn's ministry as well as Russ Disdar's, it is frequently the case that, so not everyone with DID is SRA, but many of the survivors of SRA are DID. So Lisa and Sarah, I'm sorry if I butchered that. You can school us all when you get the floor.
Right. And, you know, and maybe, possibly, we may have another special guest joining us sometime throughout the next 2 hours. And so without further ado, so last week we had Chris and Lisa was able to present her testimony, a very powerful testimony. And we got to talk with Chris and Lisa a little bit as a couple about how it is to be in a relationship with somebody who suffers from either DID, and tonight we'll get to talk more about SRA, DID and SRA, satanic ritual abuse, and what it's like to be in a relationship with somebody who endured that, and like I couldn't even fathom what their lives are like. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring in Chris and Lisa. We're gonna bring in Raj and Sarah, and we're just gonna say, I'm just gonna say this. I'm gonna allow Sarah first to give her testimony, and then we'll just take it from there. And you know what? It's really, it's the Holy Spirit's in charge. And so I believe Vicki and I both, we're kind of gonna duck out and pop in if we have questions or comments or something that we feel needs to be said. But other than that, we're gonna try to give Sarah and Lisa the floor, and Raj and Christopher the floor to tell you, one, their testimony, and two, what it's like in the aftermath of that kind of trauma. All right. So without further ado, we say welcome to Raj and Sarah, and welcome to Chris and Lisa. Thank you so much for coming and for giving. Well, not for coming, because y'all ain't came nowhere, right? So, because you can't, because you're quarantined, and your governor said no. I know, because my governor said no too. So you guys are joining us, and I just thank you for actually, giving up 2 hours of your time to come on and actually expose some of your vulnerability, if I could say that. So again, thank you, Raj, Sarah. I'm going to bring you guys in first to open up, and Sarah, maybe you can give a testimony and kind of take us back to, because it's to my understanding that you didn't. I'll just let you tell your testimony. That's all. How about David? Just shut up.
Leave it to the expert.
Good.
Okay. Well,
I'm
waiting for David because I like to know, like, what was he going to say? Because I'm that kind of person. But anyway, first I want to say hello to the Take on the World audience, because I'm in the live chats usually. So it's nice to meet you all in person, so to speak. But anyway, so my story really starts the day I was born, even before I was born. I was born in a very small town in Southwest Michigan, where everyone knew everybody. The same doctor that delivered my mother and her siblings delivered me also. So it was a very small town. And I grew up with my dad's side being Satanic occult and my mom's side being Freemasons. My grandfather was a 33rd Freemason. So literally the day I was born dead and had to be revived. And when I was revived, I was abused right away into a ritual for the Freemasons. And that started my abuse. So I was the firstborn of my parents. They were very young when they had me. Well, I say very young, I mean 18 when they had me. But being the firstborn, I should have been a boy. So it was a high disappointment that I was a girl. And being a girl meant being abused. And that's literally all it meant. So I don't really have a lot of, memories didn't come up until I was in my mid-30s. But when they did come up, My first vivid memory was at age 2 when my dad started sexually abusing me. And my mom knew about it because she would stand there and watch. And one of my, so that was one of my earliest memories. And then by the time I was 5 years old, my grandfather and my father sold me as a sex slave into the occult and the Freemasons. And that was my daily life. And they started giving me wine at the age of 5 and beer at the age of 7. My mom would provide me with pain pills to calm me down at the age of 7. And probably by the age of 10, I would have considered myself a drug addict and alcoholic because every day it would be drinking and drugs and abuse. So I would go to school during the daytime, and school was the same school my mom and all her siblings grew up in. So I thought it was safe for me, and because I loved school and it was my escape from home. But then, the moment school was over, then abuse would begin again. When I was 5 and a half, my brother was born. And since he was a boy, he was the world to everybody. But my parents did not, they didn't know how to be parents. So they would leave him with me. And I was raising a baby at the age of 5 and a half. And he actually called me mom until he was 8 years old. So he actually literally thought I was his mother. So by let's fast forward a little bit because this story could get on and on. I ended up by age 8 was married off to the occult and the Freemasons and had an actual wedding ceremony. And that was just my life, was abuse, abuse, abuse. And to control that, what I thought I did was I played basketball. I was in every sport imaginable. I was in every activity imaginable because in my town, you had to be. And it was like the cover up where everyone was perfect. You walked around with a smile on your face. My mother would stand me and my brother by the door every day and said, "You are perfect. You have nothing wrong with you. And you are to smile all the time." And if she caught us not smiling, it meant being beaten. And so, besides sexual abuse was emotional abuse and physical abuse and satanic ritual abuse. And, there was no safe zone. My dad's side of the family wasn't safe. My mom's side of the family wasn't safe at all. And, and so, anyway, by the time I hit high school, all I cared about was leaving that town. I really believe I obviously did not grow up knowing Christ at all. And one thing I should mention is there was a Methodist church in town, and that was the hub for the occult. And the pastor was the occult leader. And so he would have his church service on Sunday mornings for your sweet little old ladies. And then afterwards, and the rest of the week would be occult activities inside the church basement. So he ended up, my grandma and grandfather and my great grandma all went to that church. And so my grandma and my great grandma loved me dearly for who I was. And I see now that it was God giving them as someone to love me for who I am and protect me, in the sense of, they just love me, and part of the way they would love me was, after abuse would happen, they would give me a treat and stuff like that. But in my child's mind, it was like love. Anything attention was love. So whether if it was hitting or the sexual abuse or the physical abuse or whatever, any attention at all meant love to me. And so I didn't know it was negative love at all. And so I'll go back a little bit. So at 8 years old, I made a declaration: I will get out of this town and I will never turn back, and I will never be like my family. And one day I'll get my brother out of this town. And so at 8 years old, I knew just life wasn't right, but I didn't know why. And I didn't know that I had created altars. I didn't know anything. And I didn't have memories of things happening. So by the time I left high school, I hightailed it out of that town to a college in Iowa. But, the occult was still there at the town in Iowa, that college, and I was active in the occult at this Christian college in Iowa, the occult meant, and, still living my life. So, um, but it was also in that college where I met the Lord. And, um, I and January 13th, 1995 was when I met the Lord. I was almost 20 years old. And
Sarah, hold on one second. I'm sorry. How were you still participating in the occult? Just for anybody that's wondering, like, how were you still participating in the occult at this Christian college? And you don't have to give details, but
yeah.
in general, in reference.
Yeah. So by the time I was in middle school, I was bringing other kids into the occult and teaching them how to do seances and, the Ouija board and, just, um, just different occultish things. So in college, there was a tower in the administrative building, and people would meet up in the tower and hold seances and play with the Ouija board and do spells and just do a lot of other occultish things. And some of these people that participated were professors and attenders of the college and in the very small town. So, that's how I participated in the occult in college. So, but very good question. And I really am kind of glancing over a lot of what happened to me because I want to get to the part of when I found out I was DID and how the memories started coming back. So I became a Christian in college, and I was forced to move back to Michigan that year also because I was a basketball player and I had a scholarship to college to play basketball. And I hurt myself to where I couldn't play anymore. And so I lost my scholarship, and no one was paying for college for me at all. So I had to pay. So I had to move back to Michigan, which meant moving back in with my parents, which meant abuse would continue. So when I moved back to Michigan, my parents would not let me have anything to do with, Jesus and church or anything at all. They even burned my Bible. So I was just kind of stuck. And the abuse just picked right back up where it left off, like it never had stopped. And so I was 24. I was getting fed up, and I literally ran away in the middle of the night with $50 in my pocket and drove to Minnesota, where my roommate from college was. And my roommate from college was instrumental in leading me to the Lord. And I literally hit Indiana, stopped at a payphone and called her and said, I'm on my way. And she said, okay, I'll be waiting for you. And so I drove to Minnesota through the night and never looked back. But that didn't mean anything to my parents because, like, I would be at bus stops and there would be 3 guys showed up to kidnap me, to take me back to Michigan. And there would be knocks on the door in 3 a.m. With people trying to kidnap me, or police would show up and say, you're arrested now. And I'd be like, what did I do? I just went to work and home, and so once you're in the occult, they don't let you go very easily. And it's been 25 years since I came to Christ, and there's still some holds on me that we're unaware of, but I can feel them some days, and especially after my mother contacts me, because she was also a big she was like a big abuser, mental wise and mind control wise for me. And so in Minnesota, I just was living my life and got plugged into a beautiful church and was growing in my faith. And I'd have to go back to Michigan here and there. And I should rewind, because I did mention drugs and alcohol. So the day that I became a believer, the next morning I woke up with no desire to drink or do drugs ever again. And I've left that life behind. And I believe that was God doing that, because I didn't have that desire anyway. It was forced upon me and pushed upon me to do that. So I'm very thankful, because I do know a lot of people, who struggle with that. And I'm thankful that's one thing I did not have to struggle with at all. So I ended up in Minnesota, and that's where I met my husband, Raj. He obviously is from India, and we met through, he lived in Texas and worked in Texas at the time. And to make a very long story short, because that could be a whole nother YouTube show on how we met, and we were the first love marriage in his whole family, because all the rest are arranged. He lived in Texas. I lived in Minnesota. We met through a friend. And after 3 years, he moved to Connecticut for work. I moved to Connecticut to say, is this really going to work? And we ended up marrying, obviously. And it was a couple years after marriage that the bottom fell out. My brother was turning 30. My parents had just divorced after 35 years of marriage. And when my parents divorced, the memories came flooding back to me on things that happened. And I really didn't believe it. And I had gone to a conference about DID. I had for years been working with women who have been sexually abused, because I knew one incident of sexual abuse in me. That's it. And, I went through a class, like a healing group, and then I started leading the healing group and leading groups of women and all that. And so we went to a conference on DID, and as we were in this conference, I was sitting there going, it sounds like me, but it's not me. It's not me. And they had a questionnaire at the end of the notebook, and I secretly took that questionnaire and scored 100%. It's a questionnaire you don't want to score 100%, but I did. So I scored 100% on that questionnaire. And I had a friend who was a counselor, but we were just friends. And I said, can I just come and visit you one day? And I did. And I looked at her and I said, do you think I have DID? And she's this really cute, short lady, and she just giggles. And she has this giggle that makes you laugh as she giggles. And she goes, oh, honey, I knew from the day I met you, you were DID. And I said, well, how do you know? And she's like, because I'm DID also. And so, it really was a blessing in a way, because it gave a lot of answers, because Raj and I were always questioning so many things, and we were fighting about things, and all of a sudden 1 minute I'd be happy, and then the next minute I'd be screaming, then the next minute I'd be sad, and the next minute I'd be happy. And then it was just a revolving door, which I call it the revolving door DID, which is the type I have. Because when we first started, an altar would come out here and there, and all my altars have different names. Every single one of them have different names, besides the primary person talking now is Sarah, but there's different versions of that Sarah sometimes, because I was some people say fragmented. I was so fragmented that, to just give an example, by the time we met someone who could kind of help with this DID journey, she had discovered this thing called the womb healing, where you go back into the womb and you ask the Lord to lead you through that time your mother had carried you through. And in the 6th month of my mom, there was a curse put upon me from the occult that if I was a girl, A, B, and C would happen. And just that 6-month-old baby had over 1,000 to 2,000 altars. So, we had to deal with those and get through that to start to deal with everything else. But I would say for the first year of my diagnosis, it was just like, I'm not going to let this bother me. I'm going to pick back up. I'm going to move on. We're going to move on. And I dove into ministry so hard. And I was, I was probably the highest achieving person that I had ever been. And I've always been a high achieving person. And then Raj's parents came to visit us from India. And it was by the end of that summer, I was like done. I was crashed down. And so we started to drive every month to Virginia to meet with this lady to do ministry with me and to help me with my journey. And, she did a good amount. We did a good amount with her. But, everyone has different schools of thoughts on how to work with DID. So I had my friend here in Connecticut, and she was retired and taking care of her handicapped brother. So she really wasn't working with anybody anymore. But we were just friends. And if I had questions, she'd answer questions. And, I didn't realize, though, how much the occult still had a hold on me. And Raj, there would be times I would just get up and run away, and Raj would have to come find me, or he'd run after me. And it was always a fiasco because the occult was pulling me back towards them. And I would just literally take off running, or I would get such an energy in me that, I would slam my husband against the wall and hold him up by his neck, and it was obviously a demonic thing. And he was calm actually through it all, which is amazing. He's a very calm personality type. I think anyone who marries a DID SRA has to have a calm personality type, otherwise it's really not going to work. So we ended up moving to Virginia to work with this ministry, which I thought was beneficial in a lot of ways because I did learn a lot about how to work with DID SRAs, and I had a few clients of my own. So it is a passion of mine to see DID SRAs get free. It's not an easy road. It's not quick, and everyone is very different, and everyone has a whole different journey. And, I think for me, the amount of altars in me are kind of countless. I do have a lot of primary altars that come out and talk on a regular basis. Quite a few kids, meaning 8 years old or less. I have some pretty sassy teenagers, and I have a lot of angry altars in me. And an altar in a female can be male or female. And a lot of times the brain breaks off into a male for protection. And for me as a child, up until the age of 8, my dad raised me as a boy and called me boys' names. And I was a boy until the age of 8. So I have a lot of boy altars because they had to break off to become a boy. And, to become that boy where, that would please the dad. And as I got older and playing sports, like, for example, my dad, I was on a girls' basketball team. He'd say, "That's my boy." And he'd yell out a boy's name, and then I'd just play harder. So obviously that boy altar, got a teenage altar that was a boy would come out and play the basketball game. So, it's, it's still every day, altars come out, and they come out if they feel safe or if they feel threatened. There are days when I'll forget how to cook. Like, I know how to cook. I'm a wonderful cook. And yet there's days I forget how to cook because someone else is out taking over for the time being because there's an overwhelming factor for that day. Lots of times if something has made me angry, a protective altar will come out and take over and become, angry and deal with that situation. my brother does now live with us. We literally did a rescue mission 2.5 years ago, and he does now live with us. And, I am such a mom to him, because that's what I've always been to him. And, there's that protective part of me that takes care of him, make sure he's taken care of, make sure he has everything he wants and needs and doesn't have to do anything, and, lots of times I know it's an altar that's taking care of him because me, Sarah, loves not having children and being able to do what I want to do, but my brother's around, he's like my child. Um, and it has been a strain um, on our marriage, but we were very fortunate to be able to go to a few DID couples retreat, or where they have the DID person and a support person, and meet a lot of couples. And so that's really helped Raj to be able to connect with a lot of those men and a couple ladies, and be able to have that connection to talk and say, hey, this is what's going on. How do you help me through this? And um, it's a lot of talking. Raj and I talk a lot and have to talk out everything a lot. And, I'm a very, 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 very stubborn person. And I will not deny that. Although some days I'll tell him I'm not that stubborn, but I am. And, so, there's days I'm like, I'm not talking, I don't want to talk and deal with this. And there was probably about a 5.5 year period where I said, I refuse to say I'm DID. I refuse to say I'm SRA. I refuse to say anything. I refuse. I'm turning away from it. I never want to deal with it again. And during that time, it was just popping up in my face all around. And finally, one day I said, okay, fine. I'll deal with it, and start to work on the journey. And continue to work on the journey. And I have a very, very, very deep layer of protection. It's like a brick wall that is 30 million feet deep. I know it. And, I know there is still a lot of parts of me, a lot of altars that are connected within the spirit realm. And I know there is a lot of parts of me that are still out there that I have, like, literally, I would say go away and never come back, but they're still there. They're still there. And so recently I've said, okay, everyone can come back. Let's just start dealing with this, and let's start working on this very slowly. I don't want to, all at once, because I just would be afraid if it all came back at once. So I just said, okay, Lord, very slowly, please. So that is kind of the high level of my journey. Like I said, there's quite a bit more. There is a lot more with the occult side of things. But yeah, that's
Hey, Sarah,
yeah.
can you hear me, Sarah? So I have a question. When we who don't know a lot about this think of DID, we think in terms of altars that are friendly and helpful and protective, and they're stepping forward and they're bearing the brunt and they're friends, so to speak. But when you talk about thousands of them being implanted, through ritual, and you talk about there's several that you say just go away, what is the difference there? Because in DID we have ones that are there to protect you, but sounds like you're talking about there's also mixed in with that ones that are not there to protect you. How do you know the difference, and is there a difference, and what does that look like?
Yeah, there is a difference. Especially in the cult, people, the cult members make altars for the demonic purposes, for evil purposes. And just to be very frank, I was used in the occult for a lot of different purposes. And so they create altars to take them to do their dirty deeds, so to speak. And so those you kind of want to cut off. You don't want them
Mm-hmm.
there with you at all. And like my kid alters and such, you know, they're there to protect, and they were there to protect during the abuse at the age of 2, you know, and all the other ages. And you know, there's the altars that, you know, might help you with daily activities. Like, for example, when I lived in Minnesota, when I first moved there, I got a job at a high brokerage firm, started as a receptionist, and within 3 months was trading stocks on the stock market. I know nothing about the stock market. You asked me today, I know nothing about the stock market. But I worked my way up into management, and I knew everything. So there was obviously an altar created in me that knew everything about the stock market and was very successful in that career. You know, until 9/11, then I got laid off and became a missionary. But so, you know, those altars are good and they have a purpose. But, you know, that altar, when that job ended, you know, Raj will ask me today, like, how do you, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, I'm like, I don't know. So yeah, altars can be made for all different reasons, and they can be man-made.
I have a question now, and I have this question because I was talking to somebody the other day about DID, and they were like, well, what is it? And I was trying to explain it to them, right? And they posed a really good question to me. They said, well, how do you know that these two women, meaning, you know, Sarah and Lisa, of course, how do you know that these two women, that's who you're talking to? How do you know that you're not talking to one of their sneaky, conniving, protective little altars? And I was like, I don't know. That's a good question. Right? And I don't. It's not. You know, this. It's not a joke, but it's serious. But how do you know, right?
That might be a great question to ask Chris and Raj.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so I mean, the you know, as Vicki was alluding to when she started, the entire altars are created to help. In Sarah's case, Sarah, the primary core person, to protect them, to help them deal with different different situations which the core Sarah couldn't deal with it. So the entire system is formed. Even the ones that are loyal to the cult, they were initially formed to protect Sarah, but they were programmed to become loyal to the cult and whatnot. This entire system is to protect Sarah. So when I talk to Sarah on a regular conversation, you know, the system automatically knows that, hey, Sarah's husband is here, and you know, the primary Sarah needs to talk to him because she trusts him and she's safe. He's a safe person, so it automatically figures out to send a trusting Sarah, who's you know, who acts as a spouse, to kind of work with me. When we are at a place where there is all of a sudden a threatening situation where someone is threatening, some other, you know, Sarah's system would automatically say, hey, you know what, this is a stressful situation, we need to protect Sarah. So one of the protectors who's trained to protect in that situation would kind of come up. So it's a very amazing way. I think it's to me, it also is a gift from God for a child to protect herself, protect the child itself. So as the person grows, the system evolves, and it's complex, extremely smart and efficient to protect the primary person, Sarah. So when you genuinely ask the question, most of the time you do get a person who's able to deal with the person and give the legitimate answer. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add.
And like Raj has said before, like, okay, I don't know who's there, but I want to talk to my wife, Sarah, right now. You know, so sometimes he has to call out me, and you know, if we're mad at him, sometimes we don't want to come.
That's true. That's true.
You know, so
like, no.
not coming out today. Until you give me.
But see, look, I'm not trying to like. I'm not. Listen, you guys know I love you all, right? I'm not trying to cast doubt into Raj or Chris, but I mean, I'm saying, like, how do you really know? You know, like, I don't know if I could do it. and I'm just being honest, right? Because it's the way I feel. I don't know if I could do it. I mean, I have a hard enough time thinking about having a wife, but thinking about having a wife and some, you know, like last week, you know, I was like, well, Chris, how do you do it? How can you take on somebody with so much baggage, you know? And I'm not saying that I'm not trying to demean either of you, but it is baggage, you know? And so like, to me, like, I don't know, I guess, you know, I'm not there, I haven't been there, but I would just be like, always wondering, like, yeah, is that really her? You know, like,
well, I think after a while you get
here, because I met a young Lisa at the restaurant,
yeah,
you know, and so I knew the difference. But then I started wondering, and I'm gonna be straight up and honest with you, I started wondering, like, yeah, is that really Lisa that I'm talking to every day? You know,
sure.
That's supposed to be Lisa.
And I can totally get that, and Raj is 100% spot on, and sometimes, like Sarah said, you do have to just flat out say, okay, it's time for Lisa, the adult Lisa, to come and talk to me. I need to talk to her. It's important. But imagine if a bunch of people entered the room. Okay, so with her, all of her altars look the same because it's her. But imagine if you had a bunch of people in the room and you closed your eyes and they all sounded different, right? Because people act different, they behave different. So you begin to, even though I'm always looking at this beautiful woman that you're looking at, you can pick up on different things that they do. And one thing that I noticed that you can really tell when an altar comes out, they don't just want to talk, but they want to experience feeling and thing. And so you can always see that they're usually making motions and trying to self-assure themselves. And I can tell when she changes. And it is a serious question, though, because I've absolutely wondered it myself before. So,
well, in the beginning, it was hard for you to know.
Sure, it takes time, and it definitely takes.
It's a lot over me, and he would tell my littles, you know, when we were first together, how old was I? 32. Say, I need 32 Lisa today. and sometimes I would just be crying. If I was in flashbacks, it would be hours. And he would just keep crying. He'd play his guitar, and there were times when it would take a long time, but I would come out of the flashbacks and just be in tears for hours. And we would pray a lot together. But there were a lot of mannerisms, like little children. And I used to not believe myself. It was so hard. But now that I have a grandbaby who's 5, there were different things that she would do when she would toddle around the house, and little kid. And I have a friend who has a daughter who's about a year and a half. And she would just do the little things that little kids do with their hands, you know. And I used to think, oh, I'm making this stuff up in my head, because I'm still hearing the people in my past saying, you're making that up. So when my granddaughter came along after she was born, and she would toddle around the house and do different things with her hands, or the way she would fumble and fall, I would just look at my husband. We would look at each other across the room, and just our eyes would get real big, like, wow. Like, that to me was confirmation, because I wasn't around any real little kids. I didn't work in the nursery at church. I didn't, you know, and my grandbaby didn't come until I was 146 now. So I guess I was 41 when she was born. So all that time, those 8-9 years, I've gone through all those different things and mannerisms. Like I said, like the way I would move my hands. And then after she was born, seeing her go through all these phases, I'm like, wow. And then, like, even seeing my friend, her 1.5-year-old was singing in the kitchen and making up her own songs. And some of it was gibberish, and some of it was like good phonics, because she's learning how to speak, and some of it was gibberish. And I was looking under the table at her, like trying to find her, and I would switch, because I was like, she's my new friend, you know, and I was so excited, new friend. And I'm looking under the table trying to find her. My friend was like, stop looking at my cards. And then I switched right back to an adult. So later I said to my husband, I hope nobody noticed. He's like, I didn't even notice you switched. I was like, okay. But I noticed when I was watching her sing that just the babbling and the little things and the way she was singing, I again told my husband later that night, I was choking back tears, because I was seeing myself, but seeing myself last week or seeing myself 2 years ago and saying, wow, I was that young when I went through that trauma. And that was hard for me, you know. But but the difference
It's
is
definitely mannerisms that you
a
pick
lot of
up on.
mannerisms.
And of course, the sound of the voice changes too.
Yeah, but with me, I don't have different personalities like her. Mine are all me, but different ages. Some people have, like Sarah, hers are all different people. I'm not completely split off. I'm still, my memories are integrating now. I'm going through integration, so we're coming together more. But I still have some splits off where I come back like once in a great while when I'm going through a lot of stress. I'll say, where am I, or who are you? And I'll think he's my babysitter. But those aren't as frequent as they used to be, you know.
So, okay, so here's like, gosh, my mind is like all over the place right now. So like Sarah and Lisa, do you, I don't even know how to say it. Do you know when an altar comes out? Do you, like the, I think Radish calls it the core you.
The core.
The core. So does the core you remember or know, like, okay, like, and you know what, like the first thing I think of when I think of DID is the first thing I thought of just like completely left my mind. And Sybil, that's it, the movie Sybil. And so, but I always like kind of wondered, and I guess now I can like find out, but because one, you know, I really want to know, like, do you like remember, do you know when the altar comes, do you remember it, and do you or you and your altars ever like kind of talk to each other? I mean, I see people talking to themselves, right? And so sometimes I'm like, are they really talking to someone inside of them, and is that person answering them?
Well, I'll answer for me.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be funny here, guys. I'm really not.
I know.
Very good questions. I'm still stuck on like, how do you know you're married to? And I was thinking, I worked with Muslims and they can marry 4 wives, and little did Raj and Chris know they were getting hundreds of wives.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So, but for me, it's called co-conscious when your altar and you know what your altar is doing. I was not co-conscious for many years. I would lose days, weeks, months, and years of my life and not even know. Like you could ask me like, what happened, you know, when you were in high school? Like, what was your graduation like? I'd be like, I don't know. I wasn't there, you know, because I don't know. So it took me probably, you know, finally there was one day in my journey, I said, Lord, I want to be co-conscious, because I did not know what was happening in my sessions. I would go days and not know, like, and all of a sudden, like, I would sit there and I'd have something and I'm not a spender. And I'd be like, who bought this? Where did this come from? I don't even know what this is. Why would I buy this? I don't even like this, you know? And, so I prayed and said, Lord, I really want to be co-conscious. And he honored that. And I became co-conscious with my altars. So when they came forward, it was kind of like they were in the, you know, front seat of the car and I was in the back seat of the car. So I could hear them, I could see them, I could, you know, interact. And I learned how to interact where I do talk to them. You know, I say, okay, you know, this isn't right. We shouldn't be, you know, and talk. Okay. A big thing was Raj was very unsafe. And so all of my little kids had a name for him. And it was not a very nice name. And now it's a funny, you know, now we use it as a funny name, but, you know, and so, you know, now I say, okay, well, you know, that's just, Mr. So-and-so, and that's okay. And, so now I do talk to them, but for quite a while, I did not interact with my alters because I didn't know they were out at all.
But do they answer you?
They do. They do. I do get answers. Sometimes they will argue, like, especially if I have to make a decision. And if I have to make an adult decision and the teenagers and the littles do not like that decision, then, it's an all-out war. And sometimes a little temper tantrum might come or whatever. But so, and there is times now, though, I still lose chunks of time. I don't lose days anymore. I'll lose hours. Like sometimes Raj will come home from work and say, "What do you do today?" I don't know. I don't know. But then the laundry would be done, cooking would be done, some cleaning would be done. I don't remember doing it. So
I need that one.
I feel like if I am overly maxed out, I do lose that co-consciousness still.
Okay, so John just made a comment. Say that again.
I said, how many people are actually like this and we don't even know, like people that we talk to?
Yeah, and so the thought that came to my mind first was, how many times have you been like in a conversation with somebody and be like, well, why did you even say that? And they're like, say what? And you tell them, they're like, I didn't say it. I wouldn't say something like that. And like you either heard them or you saw them or somebody that you really trust says they did too say that, And so how many times is it really not them? It just blows my mind of how many people could possibly be, because we know that trauma, especially molestation, sexual trauma has become, sadly, way more common
mainstream
in the families than anyone would like to think about or even accept. Okay, because the heck with who I know, but just the people sitting right in front of you on that screen know people who have been, you got some of the best families, and it goes way, way, way back. I was raised in the 70s and I was molested. And I know people that were raised in the 60s and they were molested, and people that in the 80s and they were molested, and more in the 80s that were molested. And, so it doesn't really matter, but it's so common now that sexual trauma and sexual molestation is so common. And it's sad because people say, well, it's not really that common. Yeah, it's more common than you could fathom at this moment. It's more common than you can even begin to fathom. And you're probably related to both victims and victimizers. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I felt that was an important comment, because I hope that just that last segment would just have people really thinking about when they run into people or people that they deal with on an everyday basis, and they say, well, why did you lie? Why did you do that? And they say, I didn't do that. Maybe they're really serious. They really don't know that they did it, and maybe somebody else did it, and it's not really them.
Yeah, I have a funnier story of it. Like sometimes, before we go to bed, Sarah and I would pray together, and then 5 minutes later, Sarah would say, "Hey, you didn't pray. Can you pray?" Like, I've learned, like, oh, okay, somebody else was praying with me, I guess. So I go back and pray again. But that's an easier, simpler note. But then there's been times where we have argued. I just told this, and you are lying, and So there was like when we are initially first couple of years or before we got to understand DID, a lot of our fights were, I just said it, or Sarah would say absolutely not, and then it's almost like how can you deny it when I just said it? It just happened, and so there's a lot of misunderstanding at the time, but thank God that God's been gracious and we understand it now, and we are able to work through it. Again, like when we went to these DID couples and their support person sessions, there were others, almost all the DID survivors whom we saw. It was hard for them to, once they realized they are multiples and working with it, very hard for them to hold a job in a business life. And a lot of these very smart. I know Sarah is extremely efficient person, but one common theme is like once all this comes out, it's so hard for them to survive, to hold a business job and work through in that fast-paced times. And over there, several of them are married and their husbands were supportive, but there are others who are, the marriages failed, and it's really very challenging for those survivors to make a living event. So it has devastating effect. And if for those survivors who do have good spouses, it's a blessing. They could be protected and helped through, but others, it's really hard. Most of them end up in the prison, because they just can't deal with it, and they commit a crime, and then they end up.
Yeah, and so once again, think about all of the people who are being convicted or go to court, and they're pleading their innocence. They're crying. They're like, I did not do that. And we say, well, yeah, the video saw you, so you did it. And maybe they didn't. Wow. It's just, I can't imagine, like John just said to me, he said, it's way more prominent than we even can even believe right now. And look at the workforce. As soon as Raj says about how hard it is to keep a job, that's the first thing that popped in my head was, look at the younger generations that can't hold down a job. And I'm not just talking about the ones who are entitled, because the system has taught them how to depend on the system. I'm talking about that just don't want to keep a job, that just they're lofty. They're like, oh, well, yeah, whatever. Maybe they're just like, yeah, whatever, because they don't want to say, well, I don't remember that, or you never told me that, or I never said that, because then they feel like maybe they're a little crazy, or they got a little too high, or they sniffed a little too much glue or something. But in reality, it comes down to them being victimized and traumatized and having a disorder. And I just like sit here like right now, and I think about all of the young people and older people too, but I think about the younger people that are suffering from this and have no idea what it is and may not even believe in it. And could be healed.
Think about how many more kids are in daycare and what's going on in daycare.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, just to think about Alfred Kinsey, where did he get table 34 results from? He got them from daycare workers, parents, teachers, homosexuals, and himself in the lab. But think about the daycare workers, and that was back in the 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s.
And daycare is way more prevalent today.
Well, and I think too, if you have an understanding of multiples, a lot of things in the world that don't seem to make sense all of a sudden make sense. We have seen so many things on TV in the last decade, celebrities going crazy, especially, and TMZ's all over it, and it's all they're on drugs, they're crazy, they live these eccentric lifestyles. But when you look at like a Britney Spears shaving her head bald, or you look at the Creed lead singer who's sending videos from his iPhone in a bunker saying the CIA's after him and have dried up all his funds, and people are just mocking him because he's on like a drug binge. This stuff actually makes a lot more sense when you realize how abused that particular group of people is.
Yeah.
Britney Spears does have D.I.D.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
I want to say a couple things. One, on the job thing, I know every job I've ever gotten, because I've been very successful at every job, has been due to my connection with the Freemasons. Because the moment I did the Freemason renunciation, I could not get a job anymore.
Wow.
And every boss I ever had was connected to the Freemasons, including jobs out here in Connecticut. So there is even a lot of CEOs and high up people who are DID, SRA themselves, and, I guarantee if they found out, they would probably crumble in a lot of ways. But there's also a lot of like just plain old occult Freemason people up there recruiting, their own people to work in the company and move up through the ranks very quickly. Because in all honesty, I was a manager in a lot of companies I should have never been a manager in, because I didn't know how to do the job, but I knew how to do it,
Mm.
And then the other thing I want to say deals with basically LGBTQ stuff is a lot of LGBTQ are also DID. And I have seen it where I have gone through with multi people, the womb healing, where in the womb, the mother wishes for a boy, or wishes for a girl. They come out the opposite sex, and then they're, homosexual. And I have seen it where I've ministered to people and done womb healing where immediately that sensation goes away. And let's say they're lesbian, the next day, nope, I have no sensation for that anymore. Because of the womb healing.
So here's a really good question. Well, I mean, I think it's a really good question. It's for me, right?
It's yours.
No, but here's a good question. Like, can an altar take control? And the reason I ask is because as you were talking about, especially LGBT, that popped in my head just about not 10 minutes ago, right? It popped in my head and was like, what about all of these boys that really believe they're girls, and girls that really believe they're boys? And and I know a lot of it could be dealt with because I recognize it, right? I've been there and I've done that, but there are some cases that are different, and they're so different that it just makes me wonder, like, could it be an altar who has taken over? It's like they don't even, I know a couple young people right now that don't even identify as themselves. Like I know a girl who is Caleb. She is Caleb. She says she's born a boy. She's always been a boy. She's always going to be a boy. She has boy stuff, and I know she doesn't. I know who she is, right? And it just, like this just now, it just makes me wonder, like, could Caleb be an altar, and could Caleb take over? Is that
I would
something
think
that
I think that's a very high possibility. Because literally my dad raised me as a boy until 8 years old. He would not allow, I was sexually abused, but he dressed me as a boy. He called me a boy's name. I had a boy's haircut. Everything was a boy. And I guarantee that if it wasn't less kosher in the town I grew up in to be transgender, they would have had me be transgender, because my dad wanted a boy, and that's all he wanted. And, so it produced in me just this feeling of genderlessness. And it was actually when I went to your conference in November, David, that like all of a sudden I realized I've always felt like I was genderless all my life. I'm a female. I look like a female. I'm a female. I'm married to a man, but like, I'm the biggest tomboy there is, and, so I always felt genderless all my life. Like I didn't identify with boy and I didn't identify with a girl, because, I know identifying with the boy is not right, because, about 9 or 10, when you started hitting puberty, you were taught you're a girl, you're a girl, you're a girl then, and then it's like, just that confusion, and then having boy altars and girl altars, and, so really it was just in November that I realized that's what I have always felt, like, genderless. So, an altar definitely can come out and be primary in that part. I honestly believe for many years of my life, an altar lived my life, because they live that life because the core person, the nucleus person, the core needs to be protected. And until that person feels a little bit safe to start coming out, that core person, so core Sarah, whoever she is, so to speak, could never come out, even though people would call me Sarah. But interesting enough, I have some people who call me by different names because I think I've introduced myself by different names to them, you know. So like a family out here, the whole family calls me Sally because that's what they call me, is Sally, you know. So, you know, until that core feels safe, an altar certainly lives life for them. So this Caleb, this girl who thinks she's Caleb, literally an altar could be Caleb and living her life.
So I guess I don't have this question properly formulated, so it may come out strange. But as you're talking, I'm just thinking, obviously, as many people probably are, of the Baphomet, which is this sort of hermaphrodite conglomeration of man and woman and goat and all this. And that is the god that, you know, the occult supposedly worships. That's their iconography for Lucifer or whatnot. And just thinking about it being in terms of, we are all created in the image of God. So if you've got someone who's worshiping another god and they're performing rituals, it would seem to me that we do start to slowly become the image of the God that we do serve. And so I'm just wondering if the androgyny or the transgender or any of that comes from the very image of the Baphomet, which is a representation of the God that the occult worships. Is there any link there with, I know there's a lot of transgendered gods in the Sumerian pantheon as well.
I think you know, we don't know, to be honest, but the moment there's a SRA, there's a cult worship introduced, you're just opening the programmed altars to all kinds of stuff. So and obviously, you know, most of the cultists, you know, worships all these crazy gods. So there's a possibility that they can be influencing some of these aspects.
I mean, because like ultimately, and I want to bring Chris and Lisa in, but I mean, the one thing that keeps I'm trying, like, I don't want to offend anybody, but like, I don't know, and I don't get where the line is drawn between spirits to be delivered from and altars. And I guess that would lean more towards Vicki's question of, you know, if it is, then that would be, I mean, you know, like 1,000 altars, like immediately I think Legion. And so like my thing is like, what is there to be delivered from and what is there to do away with or to cancel out or void or like however it works. Yeah. Break away from, exactly.
Yeah. Integrate versus casting out. That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a really great challenge for any counselors and anyone who's supporting it, because there's a sense of discernment there, whether you're dealing with an entity or an altar who is misguided and misinformed and programmed, or are you dealing with a demonic entity who was connected with this particular person? And so it's a lot of discernment that needs to happen. And thank God we have our Lord Jesus Christ. And the times when, you know, the counsel who worked with Sarah, the way that she would do is to always bring God into it and give the discernment to separate the spiritual demonic entities from the actual altars. And they usually, God definitely answers a prayer to separate them and then, you know, deal with the demonic entities the way you would cast them away and pray to God to, you know, send them where they're supposed to be, and then work with the altars. And you could work with them, and we have seen, Sarah and I have seen several these altars getting healed, and a lot of them getting integrated with you know, the primary Sarah, core Sarah, and that work through. And while it seems complex, but as you trust in God and thank God for Jesus' blood and His redemption, you could work through these complexities, and He could, you know, wisely deal with a prayerful minister and a counselor to work through these complexities.
It's like taking a big ball of yarn and just unraveling, and you just got to keep unraveling it and have patience, you know. And I know when I have worked with people with DID SRA, it's literally just a very slow process and methodical. You know, you hit one wall, you got to break through it. You hit another wall, you got to break through it. And then, you know, there's success. And then, you know, there's sometimes where you're there for hours, you know, just praying and going to the high courts and heaven and just really doing a lot of spiritual warfare stuff. So, you know, it just really depends on the person, because every person is different. You know, there's no one formula for every DID person. You know, there's ways to work with them that are quite similar, but, you know, every person's different anyway.
Right.
You know, and I'm a very firm believer with starting with womb healing, you know, because I saw how much impact and freedom that brought me, you know, so I'm a very firm believer in doing womb healing. And I'm going to comment because I did see a question in the live chat here, and not a question, a comment. And if you are a mother, you can do womb healing for your children because you carried that child. So if your child's not a believer and they are away from the Lord or whatever, you can go through and pray with somebody with discernment and go through that healing for your child.
Sarah, how would someone know how to do that? Where would instruction or someone be able to help them figure out even how to do that?
That's a good question. If you want to reach out to, I can send the information to David or you, and then.
Do you have like an email or website, something?
I don't have a website, but I have an email. I'm happy to give the email and they can reach out to me, and I'm happy to, you know, walk someone through on how to do it. It's self-explanatory in paper, but.
Is it the same email that I emailed you?
Yes, it is. And one thing I encourage is you have two people going through it. You have the person going through it, and then you have the person leading it and a prayer person. Because you have to have spiritual discernment, because obviously, you know, you don't know all that happened in the womb, especially if you're the one going through it for being in the womb. So if possible, ideally, you know, have two people plus the person, but you know, it can work if the one person is a prayer and has discernment also. But you know, feel free
Sarah,
to me and I can send you the information.
What is the difference between a womb healing and like theophostic counseling that does regressions where you go into an alpha state? And what can you clarify so that people don't get those two mixed up?
Well, yeah. Womb healing is literally just asking the Lord to reveal if anything happened inside that womb per month. So it could be something as simplistic as the mom fell down and, you know, the baby got shooken up, but that shook that baby up enough to cause trauma inside the womb. Because every month inside the womb, the baby progresses more to where they can hear, they can see, they can feel, they can, you know, do all these things. You know, and even as early as the 4th month, a baby can feel sexual stuff and masturbate in the womb as early as the 4th month. So, you know, it's really going back and asking the Lord to reveal if any trauma happened during that time and healing it, you know, where, you know, my belief, my understanding of theophostic is taking the person back in all their trauma and asking Jesus to come and speak to that.
Yeah.
Womb healing is specifically for those conception and the 9 months or whatever.
Got it. But there's also, I'm assuming, a difference in that a lot of the regression, like that's done in the secular world, it's hypnosis and it's altered states of consciousness, and it's we don't really know what spiritual plane they're accessing to get their information. And so I just wanted to clarify with people that we're not advocating hypnosis or some new age thing here.
Oh yeah, definitely.
By by prayer and the Holy Spirit revealing, and just trusting, for godly wisdom as you go through that healing.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be in person. I've done womb healing over Skype before with people, So, don't let that stop you from getting any healing with your journey at all. And you don't have to be DID SRA to get womb healing. Everyone should go through a womb healing at some point, it's a good thing to do. Even Raj went through it, So, and
Oh, wow.
he's about as normal as I know.
All right. So a few things that come to my mind, and I'm gonna try to drag Lisa in here. But like one of the things that went through my mind when we were talking about the difference between, I think you call it integration and deliverance, right? Like one of the things that keeps coming to my mind throughout like the last half hour is like, I call it STDs, right? Sexually transmitted demons. So, and I say STD because, when somebody is molested or raped, transference, right? And so a good question for Lisa and probably for Sarah too, but have both of you been one delivered from demons or from the spirits, those maybe STDs as I call it? Or I mean, I'm grasping it, right? I'm trying to grasp it, and I am grasping it, but at the same time, I can't help but lean towards wondering, like, have you guys been delivered?
Yes, I can answer that for you. I was going through counseling. I felt like for a while, and Chris would pray for me at times, I would just be sleeping in my bed and I would just feel like this presence coming in my room, and sometimes I couldn't move. I think they call that like where's it when you can't move? You can't move
Paralysis.
at all.
Paralysis.
Yeah, the sleep.
Paralysis, sleep paralysis.
Yeah, sleep paralysis. And I would just like try to tap him with my finger, and I'd be like, pray, because I just knew there was a presence in the room. And when I was going through my counseling, she said how like unraveling with the yarn, you do unravel a little at a time. And sometimes my counselor would just say, okay, this is you've talked a lot today. You need to give it some time, because my littles would just be like want to talk about everything, And she'd say, this is a lot. You need to give yourself a break. And I'd be like, oh, I'm fine. But then I'd get home and I would just be crying for hours. I'd be tearful for a few days. There were times where my husband thought, is this integration thing even doing you any good? And I'm like, it is. When you're unraveling, it's painful. It's really painful. So I was at one time, you would say I was oppressed, right? There is a difference between possession and oppression. Oppression is where you're being attacked. Possession is where it takes over. So I'm not sure how much, but he had gotten very ill in the hospital. And it was years after that I had gotten upset with him. And I was just in flashbacks and stuff. But then I remember like something took over me and I just ran right out into the field. And I'm like, what is going on? And it was like that spirit had to get away from him because he had just been praying so much. There was a spirit in me that didn't want, was like, I'm done with this guy, because it would just sit in the back and just be like, whatever, here's the guy praying for us again, But that wasn't me. I knew that wasn't me. And it presented itself and yelled at him and told him, you were supposed to be dead. How do you think you are coming into this family? And it was mocking him. You pray all the time and you thought you were going to save these kids and this woman. And I don't know who you think you are. You're supposed to die. And oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. And I was just like listening to this spirit that took over. And I'm like, in the back of my mind, like, holy crap, what's going on? You know, but he prayed over me and it left. And he even saw like, he saw this black presence way up in the field, just running, taking off. With he knew, he said, in Jesus' name, you know, Jesus Nazareth, you have to be gone. And it did leave. But other time, that was the only one time. Other times I have felt like there was a presence coming in my room and trying to attack me. And it wasn't a flashback, you know, because I don't know how I could tell the difference. I just knew that it wasn't a flashback, but I really felt like something was in the room with me, attacking me. We had a timeshare, and we would go down to a public pool, and there was a bathroom there. And I felt like, you know, I never really thought about it till now, but it seemed like when we were in different places, if I had to go and shower in different places, like at our campground, there's a shower separate from our camper. I think that they were attacking me more because he wasn't around. But I would be like trying to get a shower, and I would just feel like there was this presence around me, and I would be so scared. I just didn't want to shower in any public places. And I thought, no, it's just the fear of what I went through. But I knew nobody was there because we would swim at the latest time at night. You know, everybody was gone. He would be waiting in the lobby. So somebody would have to get past him to get to me. But I just would feel like there was this presence there. And so I knew I was being attacked a few times here and there. And that went on for years. And he would just keep praying for me. And it came and went. But I was being attacked. I know I was, you know.
So I think that you need to approach this from a multi-pronged facet,
Yeah.
I guess. You need to deal with a counselor who knows how to work, and it needs to be a counselor, preferably that's a Christian, who knows how to work and operate in discernment to work and integrate a person back together. But you also need to be able to approach this from a spiritual aspect, recognizing that originally whatever caused this trauma that happened is usually of some form of demonic activity. I mean, however you want to slice and dice it, satanic ritual abuse, sexual trauma to children, that stuff opens up doors, and you can put whatever term you want to on it. But I would definitely say that it doesn't mean that everybody with dissociative identity disorder has a demon, but it wouldn't surprise me if there is some demonic foothold or stronghold in the life there that caused this trauma in the beginning, and that wants to lay claim to, if not the whole person, to at least some of these altars. And I do know that sometimes that's to accomplish a purpose, but I would definitely recommend that people approach this both from a medical perspective, but also from a spiritual perspective.
And slowly too, because integration, it is a lot of work getting through those layers. It is traumatic. You do come out of them sometimes. Like now with Sarah, she had, I think I had said this earlier, you had different personalities. Mine were all me. And she was saying about sitting in the backseat of the car. I always saw myself sitting on a little kitchen stool. And when my other alters would come forward, I would be sitting in the back listening to everything. So I always knew what was going on.
Aware, but unable to control.
But unable to control it. Yeah, like they were in the forefront and that was it. And I had to be quiet. It was their turn to talk. But there were some times where he would just say, "Are you going to come back today? You know, I need you right now." And I would, sometimes my littles would get mad. There were some that are defensive, you know, and I would huff and puff and be like, "No." And he would just look at me like, "Seriously, I really need adult Lisa right now." And I'm like, "Okay, fine."
What you can be doing as a spouse, whether you're a husband or a wife of a victim of SRA or childhood sexual abuse, what you can be doing is you can be handling it on the surface, kind and with compassion, but you can also be praying to God to intercede on behalf of your spouse, because I think, you know, God unites two people into one. And so doesn't that therefore then give me the right to pray for her and to ask that she be delivered? So you can you can be interceding in the background all the time, and that's just as effective. But you don't have to treat every single altar as if you're dealing with a case of demonic activity. But I think it would be unwise to not consider that at all as you're approaching this.
Amen. And on that prayer note too, Jesse says we should also pray for one another, which is probably why we get put in these opportunities like this right here, to know one another. And because there's no such thing as happenstance or coinky dink or all that. Everything happens for a reason and for a purpose. And so I definitely want to touch on what you said about possession and oppression. And really, the word that we know as possession, it doesn't really mean what we think, because Derek Prince puts it perfectly where he says it's demonized. And that's where my questions have been coming from, is the whole demonized aspect of it. Because when I was raped, by a demon 2 years ago, I was a child of God. I was a child of Yah, right? And I was attacked in a hotel room, raped by a demon, physically, medically injured, and it caused me to have emergency surgery. And so because when that happened, I spent the next week not sleeping and like wanting it to happen again, but not wanting it to happen again, which is why I didn't go into my bedroom to sleep. But I was not me for that week. I was whatever was inside of me. The difference, the only way I can put put it is, is that when I left the home I was in, where this spirit or this demon followed me from or attached to me, I knew it was in my car. I could feel its presence. I could hear it breathing, but I couldn't see it. I pulled over. I looked in the back seat. It wasn't there. I'm looking in the rearview mirror. It wasn't there. I get back to my hotel. I knew it was in the room, but I couldn't see it. All the lights were on. I looked under the beds. I looked in the closet. I had pushed the desk up against the door to the hotel room. Even in the shower, I saw the shadow of it outside the shower. I ripped the shower curtain off, and there was nothing there. When I went through this, the night that it actually attacked me, it had, and I've talked about it before. I don't talk about it much, but the night that it attacked me, it had my tongue out of my mouth, and I could feel it sucking on my tongue, and I could also feel it raping me. I could feel it inside of me, and when my tongue split, my whole tongue split on the whole bottom from side to side. It split wide open. When that happened and my mouth filled up with blood and I choked on the blood, it released me. From that moment on, I no longer felt its presence around me because I knew it was in me. And so for the next week, I dealt with going into the store and not wanting to do what I was doing, but I was flirting with men. I was flirting with men. I was openly giving them the eye or the green light. But then there was still a part of me that wouldn't allow me to cross the line, right? I would go home and want to go to my bed and go to sleep because I would want this demon to come back to me. Now, I'm a person who never enjoyed what they call bottoming in that world. I never enjoyed being penetrated. I enjoyed that demon penetrating me, and I wanted it again, but there was still a part of me that wouldn't allow me to go to bed because I knew it would really happen. So that's when I was introduced. That's when I was introduced to Derek Prince, and I mean the Derek Prince, the older guy who passed away, and not the young Derek Prince from some other country who's bamboozling people. But when I was introduced to him, the very first video I was introduced to was him talking about being demonized. And so after a week, I was delivered. And it was actually a member of Russ Disdar's team and a group of other people who were present, because I honestly felt like the Holy Spirit had left me. Okay, so when I was oppressed, possessed, demonized, whatever, I felt like the Holy Spirit left me. And I know I'm not going to go on and on and on, because it's not about this, but I want people to understand the difference, because up until tonight, I really didn't. Okay, so I had to be delivered from that thing that was in me. And I knew it was in me because I no longer felt its presence around me, but I felt it in me. Was different than me just feeling like I identify as a woman, right? And so I had to be delivered from it. And so that is my question. And you've pretty much both answered it, right? Probably 3 times. But and I get it. It's there's different aspects of it, and you can't put everybody in the same mold. But have you? I mean, is it like that? Was there some like that, and some that are? I mean, can it be some of them altars, and some of them are somebody being demonized? I want to understand, because I know that if there's anybody else out there that has ever experienced even an iota of what I've experienced, they want to know.
I know I've been attacked sexually. That has happened to me. I never had any issues of having to go to a hospital or anything, but I've woken up in the middle of the night like, what just happened to me? Because he's laying next to me. He didn't do anything to me, but my body is reacting like all those things. And I prayed about it, and I asked him, I said, maybe it's just muscle memory, because I've had muscle memories where, I've swung my arms, I pulled curtains off. He saw my throat one day where it just collapsed down. And I was in a flashback of where somebody had put their boot on my throat, was standing on my throat. So sometimes I wondered if there were muscle memories that were going on and flashbacks in my mind while I was sleeping. But there were definite times where it said, maybe it was that sometimes. But sometimes I really, really felt like there was a presence there in the room. And like I would feel like it really felt like my cat was in the room. Like I would feel these indentations on my bed, and I would just lay still like there's something in here. And my cat's been gone for 2 years, so I knew that something was attacking me. And so he'll pray over me, and we'll go around and anoint the house with oil and say some more prayers and stuff. But I know that what's the verse? We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but of powers and principalities. So I know that there is a wrestling that goes on. We have our carnal side that we already have to fight against, and wanting to stay to live for the Lord. You're always, the more you feed that, like reading the Bible so much really helps. And you said, what was the thing that your dad said? It's like 2 dogs pulling at each other.
Yeah, the spirit and the flesh.
Yeah.
It's a wrestle of our dual nature. And I'm not an expert
I've been blessed
on
to
this.
have your father tell me that.
But which dog do you feed?
Right.
They're both on a dual chain or something.
It's like it's a spiritual tug of war between your new spiritual nature and your old nature.
Mm-hmm.
And whichever side you feed more, if you feed your flesh, that's going to get stronger, and that's going to have more power and more control over you. But if you're feeding the spirit, then conversely, that will have more power and more control over you. I think it might be a case as far as the altars versus demonic possession. I think it might be a case of both, as in, I think it may be all altars, but some of the altars have strongholds or footholds open so that they are more susceptible to being attacked or being demonized, however you want to word it.
Now with Sarah, I mean, she was saying how she had like 1,000 altars. Now my counselor explained it as that, especially someone going through her type of trauma, like with mine, it was like with different ages, like, I can't take it anymore. So you take the baggage, all the good stuff that you knew, all your good memories, and that's your core, and you carry that forward, and you stop there, and then you begin again. So it's like, that's why you have the 2-year-old, the 7-year-old, the 12-year-old. But with her trauma was so severe that she probably cut herself off daily or hourly or just over and over again all day long, trying to start over as a new person and take her core of, this is who God designed me to be, even though she didn't know that, but our spirit knows. We're born knowing to search for God, because he created us. So she's growing up feeling like this isn't right, and she knew at some point this isn't right. So I think that even as her younger age, she knew this was wrong. And that's why God designed our brains, that we can keep cutting off, like, this is very traumatic. We can't handle this. And I think it's really neat how God designed our minds to be able to do that so that we can make it through our childhood,
So, okay. So Sarah, are you ready for this?
Okay.
Okay. So, being that you work with a lot of SRA, right? Okay, so I would, well, up until this point, because now I don't know, right? Now I'm asking the question. So I've always imagined that SRA, satanic ritual abuse, for anybody that, that's just tuning in, we're talking about satanic ritual abuse, and Vicki, what's the other one?
D.I.D.
I know DID.
Dissociative identity disorder.
Thank you very much.
Oh.
That one.
So I would imagine, I've always have imagined that anybody that suffered through SRA, that they were like that spirits attached to them, that they were like possessed. And so, like, kind of like now I'm learning that that's not like always the case, right?
That when a spirit attaches to them, they're
No, like SRA specifically, not DID, but SRA specifically. So when they endure satanic ritual abuse, is there not transference spiritually with every victim? Like, is every victim of satanic ritual abuse, either are they demonically possessed or oppressed or not?
I mean, my experience is there's a lot of definite oppression and some possession. It just depends. Like for me, when Elizabeth was speaking, I had demons assigned to me that would have sexual intercourse with me on multi-times a day basis, starting as a young child through adulthood. And, there's some that when I became a believer, the people who led me to the Lord, we got rid of. It wasn't easy, but it, did. And I think that was more possession because, I wasn't a believer. I became a believer and, those things went away. But then after becoming a believer, the demonic attacks that I have is more oppression. And,
Okay.
even though it is physical, there'll be times I'll wake up with bruises on my body or cuts or unexplainable things. you know, and I know something happened during the night. And, you know, so, I mean, at least that's how I have, it's been described to me, and I've separated it as before I was a Christian and shortly after we got the possession gone. And then now,
see, I understand that not every day when we talk about deliverance, a lot of people think that it's, you know, they're going to take the person and they're going to cast out each and every little spirit, and it's going to be a big thing, and you got to have a minister, and you got to have a deliverance ministry and all this. And I know for a fact that that's not really so, because when Yahweh delivered me from whatever spirits or whatever there was, he said to me, and a matter of fact, I'll tell you a quick story, really a quick one. I can really tell a quick story, okay? I'm gonna try. So I went to Chris's father's church, right? And listen, that place, Chris knows, was full of a bunch of demons. Okay, them people were evil, they were wicked. They were praying for his father to die because he was ill and he no longer fit the mold of what they thought a pastor should be, right? So they were evil. And so I exploded one night, told them how evil they were, and I left. And when I left, I was like, I'm never going back there. God, if those are your people, why would you do this? And it was almost audible where I heard my father say, I'm going to deliver you. I had no idea what deliverance was, right? Or how I was going to get delivered. I'm thinking like Philip the eunuch, okay, he's getting ready to deliver me somewhere. Where am I going, right? And I was going home, and I was going to spend many months with him, with his in his word and with him, and through prayer he delivered me from each thing. That's how I learned so much about men needing to be masculine and not how men cannot be feminine, because he delivered me not just from homosexuality but from the effeminate spirit as well. So each of those things that I was delivered from, Yahweh delivered me from them personally. And that's, you know, that's why I know it's not always like, we don't always need this big to do, you know, it's not like an exorcism or something up in the Catholic Church, but it's deliverance. And so I guess I forget what you even said now at this point, but you did answer my question. So thank you for answering my question.
you know,
I'm telling you, my mind is like in a billion different places with this, because I'm like, we could go here, we could go there. No, David, just shut up and stay out of that rabbit hole. Don't go over there. Just shut up and let them talk. So I'm going to shut up, and y'all go ahead and talk.
I mean, everyone's journey is different, and you just have to go in with faith and discernment and, you know, the Lord at the lead, you know, and say, okay, what is it for me today in this session, you know, and just kind of dive in and start to unravel. So, you know, we can sometimes get caught up in the logistics of it and the terms and this and that, but, you know, it's about healing, it's about freedom, it's about delivering the survivor, you know, from their past and such, and finding that freedom that we do have in Christ, you know. And I want to do comment on one thing Elizabeth mentioned, you know, like when I was in my mother's womb and the 6-month curse came, and there was 1,000 altars for that 6-month-old fetus in the womb, you know, as I'm learning, a lot of my altars have altars. So I was constantly splitting, and your brain continues to split, you know, especially with trauma. And even if it's maybe the most minute trauma, you know, because you're so used to splitting, you split. And so I really don't know like how many altars I have in the end. I mean, thousands have already integrated in with me, multi-thousands, but you know, I do have altars that have altars. So I have altars that are younger that then has a protector altar and then has another altar to go with it, and another altar to go with it. You know,
Wow.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
system here.
No, okay.
He blew his mind. He's broke.
Wait a minute. Because you just wrecked me. Wait a minute. Okay, so okay. So
It's a deep subject, bro.
man. All right, so wait. So one thing, the first thing, well, not the first, but one thing is, so you don't integrate with all your altars, do you, or do you get rid of some of them? Because some of them aren't good, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's all different terms. So the ones that are bad, that are connected with the occult, we send them where the Lord Jesus wants to send them and to deal with it. It's the good altars that integrate within yourself. So, like, for example, that 6 months in the womb, like the lady who was leading me through the womb healing, I think she did say, like, I've never seen a case like this, she said. And so what came to her was to ask the Lord to put all those 1,000 altars into a bubble together, instead of dealing with each one individually, and see if there was a protector over them, which there was, and ask that protector to speak to all those altars on behalf, and then all those altars then integrated with that 6-month-old baby in the womb.
Wow.
So, sometimes, you have to be creative in a way,
Yeah.
Okay, but I want to understand. I really want to understand.
It's very layered.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very,
like
very layered.
altars having altars. See, altars having altars just takes me right back to my very first question. Well, Lisa, it should have been my very first question. How do I know I'm talking to Sarah and Lisa? Because I mean that's something that will. And now that
I'll be honest with you, David, you are talking to Sarah right now.
So Sarah,
Yeah.
are you telling me that altars can have altars?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the way that you could, once you understand this concept, right, it's kind of easy to wrap your mind around, is why is the first step need for an altar? It's a situation where Sarah, the primary person, core, couldn't deal with this stressful situation. It could be an abuse or some kind of situation they couldn't deal with it. So the brain got designed like, okay, let's create an altar to work through this so you could be protected from this stress, right? Now, if that altar, again, the same concept here, if that cannot deal with the stress, if it is trained to do only one skill, be in the kitchen and cook the food, right? All of a sudden, you throw a computer and then do some office work, that altar cannot deal with it. Then it thinks, okay, you know what, I need to cut another altar so who can train on the computers who can deal with it. While it could be in the same age, but then it's a slight variation. And then there's a threat, hey, we need to protect a person who could kind of deal with strong person to deal with this. They can
So it's like an org chart. You got the CEO at the top, and he's got his admin, and then he's got his 5 top managers, and then there's middle management, and you're delegating just down the tree.
Yeah, and the same thing goes with the pain, right? There's a really painful situation. There's a lot of worry, a lot of fear. Oh, you can't deal with it. It creates a pain altar who holds the entire pain of that particular incident. So, so when you deal with one incident, you just work through a plethora of different aspects of that particular abuse, and each one an altar to kind of deal with one specific aspect of it.
Okay, so Emily has a great. Now this I can wrap my head around. That's one. Raj, thank you, brother. I love you, but I couldn't grasp it. until Emily said, think of it this way, a piece of glass, trauma breaks the glass. Each piece is unique, but then those pieces can split.
Yeah.
I love that. I can grasp that. And like, and so Holly is also watching. Holly's going to be our guest next week. And so Holly said, and so this is something that, and I didn't even think about asking this, but Holly said that, and her altars come forward 3 at a time. And so her altars don't have altars, but everyone is different and their minds are split and programmed differently. But so do your altars, and Sarah or Lisa, you can answer this. Do your altars ever come out like 2 or 3 at a time or more?
That happens with me, yeah. Yeah, it depends on what situation I'm in. Like sometimes, like when my granddaughter comes over, we'll sit and play at the living room table, and we'll play with cars or something. And that takes me back to when I was a kid, because I got her the same play set I had when I was little. I found a thrift shop, and I had to get it. It was like, it was $5. I was so happy. It's a little play school garage. So we play with it. And I have to tell my littles, like, no, we got to stay calm, But then if her parents get out of the room, then that's when my littles like really want to come out, like, okay, we got to say hi, So that's talking the difference. She just thinks grandma's being silly. And I'll tell her, this is my car, and my car needs gas, and I got to put my car in the elevator, and I'll just play with her. And then, but then that altar will sit there and keep looking over to make sure her mom and dad's not coming back in the room, because Claire doesn't know when she's 5. She's just, grandma's just playing with me, And a lot of grandmas play that way anyway. But that little is like scared sometimes of being found out that I came out to play with their daughter, because I don't want them to be fearful of me spending time with her, So if they come back, if I hear them coming back in the house, I'll just sit back and be like, pretend like I'm, fixing bills or something. I'll organize some papers or do some adult thing, and then I'm like trying to switch back, like, you gotta switch back, and so yeah, sometimes I'll have a couple, 2 or 3 there that want to play cars, and everybody wants to play cars, and there's a few of us that are little ones.
Look, I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but so if 2 or 3 little kids come out at the same time, do they like fight with each other?
Not really. There's been a couple of times where, like you were talking about people talking to themselves. I've never done that in public, because I feel like even my littles know you're going to scare people. People don't talk to themselves in public. I'm sure that maybe there are some people who completely switch and they don't. but I try not to do those things. You know what I'm saying? I try really hard not to do those things. But like one day I was in the shower and I was mad at myself for the way I acted towards Chris. We had gotten an argument or something silly. It wasn't that bad. We don't really argue or fight much, but it was something silly. And so I'd say about 10, 12-year-old. Is a real one that's like really protective, and as a matter of fact, and that's not the rules. And that one was mad at me, saying, you are not nice, you are mean. And I'm like 45 in the back of my mind, listening to myself out loud, So that 10-year-old was telling me, that is your husband, you're supposed to be nice to him. and he's in the other room going, Lisa, are you okay? And I'm like,
you should have got the belt out.
So I was just, but yeah, my 10 or 12 is around the age where my parents both went to work more. And so we were left to tend to the younger ones in the house, and told this is what you have to do. Make sure the chores are done. So I feel like somewhere between 10 and 12 is when I became real protective of my younger siblings, and always, this is the rules, and we're going to get in trouble if you don't get your chores done before you come home. So that is one of my protector ones, is the between 10 and 12. And yeah, she was pretty mad at me for treating Chris badly, because she felt like, you know, he's a nice husband and you need to apologize. So that was my bossy one. So yeah, I argued with myself that day in the shower, and I was like, you know, but no, he was mean. So that's happened only a few times with me, not a whole lot.
All right, before we close the show out.
We'll talk later. You can't stop laughing.
Well, it's a very complex issue. It really is, and no matter. Go ahead.
I want to ask Sarah before we we're going to allow Chris to pray us out tonight when we're done. But I wanted to ask Sarah.
You gotta stop laughing.
Like, do you ever? Well, what about you? Like, do your altars ever come out more than one at a time? And do you argue, or do your altars argue? And if you could give like a real quick, simple answer for that, because I got one question I want you to answer, right? Is that, like, when each of you talk about your altars, right? You're like, you know, and he said this, and this was what she was doing. It's so personal, right? When your altars integrate or go away, do you miss them?
Yes. So to answer your first question, yes and yes. They come out together sometimes. They argue with each other, especially if he's in a store and says you can only pick one item. Oh boy, that's really troublesome. Okay. That's our fight right there.
I'm puzzled.
But you know, what was the last question? I got into those questions.
Like when your altars either integrate, yeah. Like, do you miss them? Do you feel like you've lost a part of yourself?
It's almost like, even though it's in you and it's with you, but it almost feels like a piece of you is gone because you've interacted with that altar as a friend for so long.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's almost like, oh, you know.
And as a protector, like, do you feel like a different kind of attachment to the protector altars than you do the other ones?
I think I personally feel less attached to the protectors than I do the other ones.
Wow.
So, okay. You know,
sometimes bossy
problems for me. So I have protectors of all ages and all genders. So
okay.
You know, sometimes they cause me more problems than helpful.
Okay. Wow. Awesome. Look, I could go on like another hour or two probably, but this is so good. You know, and like I said, next week we're gonna have Holly Baglio on, MK Ultra, DID, SRA. Gosh, and a lot of people don't even know what MK Ultra is. And wow, have you got some have we all got some boning up to do? Even those of us who think we know a little something don't know anything. So I just want to thank you guys so much. I know that we all understand, you know, we're called to speak things and to let them out and to give testimony, to be a witness, and you know, in hopes of always helping someone else, right? Understand. But I know it's not easy. I've been doing it going on 11 years and it's not easy still, right? And I know it's not easy to talk about something. I mean, gosh, I just talk about being molested and being transgender and a hooker, right? I mean, you talk about some stuff that people are going to look at you kind of odd, right? And I know that a lot of people may not even believe it. And I know that there's people in Lisa's family that aren't sold, that aren't sold on the idea that it really is true or that any of it even happened. And and I feel for them people, you know, I really do, because there's some reason that they have this denial, and you know, and who knows what it is. But I just thank you guys so much, and Raj and Chris, man, my hat off to both of you. You know, I joke all the time, like, I want to stay solo. No, I think I would love to have somebody to hold at night, but I don't. Yeah, just one, right? I just want one to hold, right? And if she has any altars, let them be like a professional in laundry, a professional cook, a professional house cleaner, professional construction so she can go to work, you know, professional IT so she can take care of all of it, right?
It's not a harem, David.
Look, I used to do housekeeping, nursing, and cooked for a jail. So we do.
But you're already married.
Quite
so
a little.
I don't know what you tell me for. Chris, check her. All right. Hey, look, guys, thank you. I love you guys so much. And you know what? And again, I'm here. I'm in Andover, Maine, with my brother John. I met him and his wife at Take on the World 2019, and I just came up here and I experienced observing my first Passover, and I don't know why I don't eat like that every day. If I could eat like that every day, it's amazing. You know, simple and amazing, and I appreciate the fellowship. So, John, thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you all for your bravery as well to tell your testimony.
Amen.
I really think it's more common than we all believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is
Amen.
way more common.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't really know anything about it till tonight. And
yeah.
It's,
I learned a whole lot. I thought I knew something, and I ain't no squat. But anyway, Vicki, thank you just for being you. And yeah. Chris, why don't you go ahead and pray us out, and we're out of here. Thank you guys. I love you guys. Lord willing, Vicki and I, with Holly Baglio, Lord willing, we'll see you next week on Dry Bones, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Lord willing, I'll see y'all in the morning. All right. Peace.
So thank you all for tonight, and let's just have a moment of prayer. Father, I just thank you for this day and for this opportunity for Elizabeth and for Sarah and Raj and I to share some of our testimony. And Lord, I just pray that this touches people, and it shows people that there is hope, and that there is help out there, and there is understanding, and there is compassion, and there is love, Father. And Lord, for anybody watching who is suffering from satanic ritual abuse or dissociative identity disorder or childhood sexual abuse trauma, I just ask, Father, right now that you would just give them freedom in the mighty name of Jesus, our Lord and Savior, Yeshua the Messiah. And I just pray for them to come to know you, God. And I just pray that they would have inner peace, Lord, and healing, Lord. And I pray against any demonic strongholds that are in their lives right now. And Father, in the mighty name of Jesus, I just command them to go so that they can have freedom to make the choice to know you, Father, for theirself. And so, Lord, just bless us and help us to be humble, to be gracious, to be understanding to people, to recognize that our experiences in life are not always the experiences of those who are around us. And just help us to keep an open mind, Lord, and to always be ready to give an answer for why there is the hope that is in us, Lord. In Jesus' mighty name we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
And you know what? Do not be afraid to ask your questions. Because the only dumb question is the one you didn't ask. All right. Peace.
Hey, everybody go outside and check out the pink supermoon.
Yeah.
Pink
God
super
bless.
moon. All
I'm
right.
headed outside
Okay.
right after this.
All right.
Okay.
Peace.
Thanks.
Good night.